Hello. This is my presentation, and I'm going to be presenting the Listuguj salmon raid that occurred on July 11th of 1981. Hope you all enjoy. Okay, so let's go on to the slide. Okay, so here's the timeline. When Canada was undergoing colonization, the British, they signed the treaties of including friendship and peace, and that was to like have the indigenous population and the Europeans kind of like let them have their rights and let them kind of practice their culture in a way like that's what the treaty was for that they signed. And then the whole declubage, I don't know how to say it, but whatever that is, that started in 1977 when the Quebecois government was choosing to kind of scrap privately owned um hunting grounds and fishing grounds, because then they thought that it's kind of like letting people take advantage of whatever they want to, which was honestly wrong, but that's what they did. And then, so this is right when the raid started on June 11th, 1981. The premier Rene Levesque, I don't know how to say his name, but Rene Levesque, called he called the chief to give them warnings about for how long they can be fishing and for how long they can catch salmon. And then they were a little hesitant about the rule the Mi'kmaq people were who were residing in the nation. So then the provincial police of Quebec started to inspect the nation. So the Listuguj, whatever, I'm sorry. But yeah, then that was just day one of the raid when they started tear gassing and then started taking those rights away. And then on June 20th, 1981, the police continue there, and that's the second day. And the bloodshed gets worse. They start destroying property, and then on top of that, there is confiscation, and many people are injured, hurt, and it's just painful. And then in 1999, a landmark Marshall decision went into effect by the federal government, and then in 2021, the federal government came to a consensus. Yeah. What was the cause of the raid? What was being held at stake? So it all started on June 9th, 1981, when the Minister of Recreation, Louis Lessard, along with the Premier Rene Levesque, was requesting to the chief of the band for members to remove all the fishing equipment from the lake in a matter of 36 hours, or members would face consequences. Like they could like whatever fishing equipment they had in the water and from fishing, then they only had 36 hours to remove it within those 2 days. And then because they didn't remove it, all this raid happened. And then according to one of the victims, and he said, my father had received a phone call from the premier that you have 36 hours to get your necks out of the water or else you will suffer, like threatening them that it's gonna really go wrong. Okay, the Quebec government's desire for Mi'kmaq to restrict their fishing for 72 hours maximum a week. So like the Quebec government was in strong favor to just cut down their fishing hours, because then they knew that they would be experiencing a bit of a scarcity of salmon. And then it was just kind of that white fear of superiority that they were experiencing, because then they were worried that what will happen, yeah, that they're just gonna run out of salmon, and then the Mi'kmaq will just take advantage of their culture. I'm sorry if I'm sounding a little muffled. It's 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. And then the Listuguj nation's rights were violated and stripped. who was involved. So definitely first and foremost, it was the provincial Quebec police officers. So the provincial police of the Quebec province, and then it was the Mi'kmaq fishermen who were the victims, and it was the members of the Listuguj community. Like it was not just fishermen, it was chiefs, the families that resided in the community, and basically anyone who lived there. And then houses were searched, and also like members were like using like human shielding themselves to protect their companions, and then also indigenous peoples from communities they came across to support Listuguj. Yeah, they came over to give them support because they felt horrible about what was going on with the provincial government. And then of course René Levesque, like with what his whole intention was, basically like this was all because of him. Oh wait, I forgot. Yeah. Also the Minister of Fisheries was involved. So here's the detail of the incident. So on June 11th, it took place in the morning of June 11th. There were 500 police officers who scattered around, who scattered all over the nation. And then they were sent by the premier to like basically just end their activity, the fishermen's activity. And then next, what happened was then like they just completely failed to acknowledge that the peace and treaty was signed by the British in 1960, which gave them rights and privileges to start fishing. And no, like sorry, like to use their culture to the full extent, and like they should be allowed to partake in whatever their culture is symbolizing. And then a day later, a second raid took place, and then the police returned to cause more damage and bloodshed by searching homes and making arrests and destroying belongings. And then they were even tear gassing and aimed rubber bullets. And it was just not fishermen, it was people in the community, even the people outside of the 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 community who came to defend. It's just 2 a.m. My brain is not focusing, but whatever. So Canada's point of view, like in the first place, the government was in major favor of banning private hunting and fishing property, and then the whole idea was just to limit down the consumption of salmon, all because there would be a shortage of salmon, in their words. And then, but like salmon is an essential part of Mi'kmaq culture, and it has been for centuries. And then like Canada was just not willing to respect the Listuguj nation by putting restrictions on them for fishing. So this is the depiction from the media. You can see it literally looks like they're just trying to escape being arrested and, like, in better words, resist arrest. That they just feel like, and then they just looks like an army is chasing, and then the policemen batting the fishermen and people in the community with batons, and then all the policemen in front of a bus lined up, and then them just storming the area just because they just wanted to practice their culture and just decide to just slightly disobey the the provincial government, who clearly had very, very useless reasons not to. Like they're just basically portraying the people of the community as villains when they're supposed to be victims, by using these types of photos with them running off, and then with like how there's this one man who has his hand out like this. It really seems like he's just trying to escape, but he's in pain. So that's just some of the negative depiction that was involved. Okay, so here's a solution. On June 23rd, 3 days after the raid, the chief of Listuguj Nation and the council met with the fisheries minister of Quebec, Lucien Lesade. the council did propose that like the Mi'kmaq would be in strong favor of exercising their rights about fisheries because it was already a pre-existing right that was really being tampered with by the government. And then the landmark Marshall decision, which took place in 1999, was taken into consideration by the Supreme Court of Canada. It was basically just involving the treaties that had fundamental rights to the Mi'kmaq to contain their culture and hunting, fishing, and gathering activities are the backbone of their culture, all these three elements. And then it was just a small agreement for that by the Supreme Court. And then almost 40 years, like exactly 40 years later in 2021, the federal government came to an agreement with the Listuguj, identifying the treaty right to use fish for marketing, harvesting, and personal usage, like to profit off of their natural resources, to give them that right for it. And then not caring so much about the so-called endangerment of salmon. So the aftermath. So annually on June 11th, the community, they closed down offices to commemorate the bloodshed and raid, that one rampage that went on that day 4 decades ago. And then it's called, I don't know how to say it, Miigwettem in English it's called, and to remember, and then in English we say remember. And then there's a community march to really just reminisce over what happened, and then how casualties and their families and the entire community, it's left a wound on them, all just because of them wanting to practice their culture and take advantage of natural resources. And the most important thing is to preserve their culture. Okay, some themes I have learned. In this course in general, I have learned about settler nativism and residential school denialism, like how I have heard about people claim they have Cherokee ancestry, and just to not have any, not feel bad about the indigenous population, which is heavily marginalized in North America, let's say. And then for residential school denialism, I did learn that people, they don't even take into account that residential schools were a thing. They don't take that into account. There are people that exist who are like that, and then they just choose to not really pay attention or focus on what really technically happened from all the atrocities and horrific issues. Excuse me. Indigenous peoples being denied the right to answer their own law. So because of the provincial government, they were forbidden from, because nations do have their own small government, like with the council and then the chief, and then all because of one province, and them being so worried about one community just fishing for salmon, and the country does not have a shortage of salmon, that stopped them from practicing their own law. And then the white fear of suppression, which was the government leaders who were Caucasian, and apparently in society they would be deemed as more superior, were afraid that they would not have any salmon left, all because the Mi'kmaq were using it for their resources and for basically it's one of the backbones of their life. Salmon is, so what I mean by the backbones, it's heavily used in their cuisine, and because it's just right by the water where they are. So yeah, sorry I'm not talking right, my brain is fried up. And here are my citations. Hope you enjoyed.